For 10 days, 4 astronauts were farther from Earth than any humans in history. But the most dangerous part of their mission wasn't going to the moon, it was coming home. Because when NASA's Orion capsule returned to Earth, it would slam into the atmosphere at nearly 40,000 kilometers per hour, turning the spacecraft into a blazing fireball, and the only thing standing between the astronauts and certain death was a 5-meter heat shield. On April 1st, 2026, at 6:35 p.m. Eastern Time, NASA's Space Launch System lifted off from Launch Pad at the Kennedy Space Center, sending 4 astronauts, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, on the first crewed mission beyond low Earth orbit since Apollo 17. Their spacecraft, the Orion capsule named Integrity by its crew, was flying as part of Artemis 2, a mission designed to test the systems that will one day return humans to the moon for good. After reaching orbit, the astronauts spent several hours checking life support systems, navigation software, and manual controls before Orion performed the powerful burn known as trans-lunar injection, slowly leaving Earth behind and sending the crew toward deep space. 4 days later, the spacecraft swept around the moon at roughly 6,500 kilometers above its surface, disappearing into a 40-minute communications blackout as the moon blocked every signal from Earth. And when Orion emerged from behind the lunar horizon, the astronauts witnessed a view almost no human alive had ever seen: Earthrise, a glowing blue planet rising above the gray lunar landscape. At the farthest point of the mission, Orion traveled more than 400,000 kilometers from Earth, briefly setting a new distance record for human spaceflight and carrying the crew far outside Earth's protective magnetosphere, where they conducted system tests, emergency drills, and observations designed to prepare future lunar missions. But despite traveling hundreds of thousands of kilometers into space, the most dangerous moment of the mission was still ahead. Returning to Earth meant crashing into the atmosphere at nearly 25,000 miles per hour, compressing the air so violently that temperatures outside the spacecraft would climb to around 2,700 degrees Celsius, hotter than molten lava, while the astronauts inside the capsule had almost no control over what happened next. The last time humans experienced a re-entry like this was during the Apollo missions more than half a century earlier, but Orion was returning from even farther away than many of those missions, meaning the capsule would endure one of the fastest and most intense re-entries ever attempted in human spaceflight. The only protection the astronauts had was Orion's massive Avcoat heat shield, a material originally developed for the Apollo era that protects spacecraft by burning away layer by layer in a process called ablation, carrying heat away from the vehicle as the outer surface chars and erodes. But engineers knew the shield had a potential weakness, because during the uncrewed Artemis, 1 mission chunks of the heat shield had unexpectedly cracked and broken off during re-entry when gases became trapped beneath the outer char layer and built up pressure, causing pieces of material to pop away from the surface. Replacing the entire shield would have delayed Artemis 2 for more than a year, so instead NASA engineers spent years running arc jet tests, wind tunnel experiments, and hypersonic simulations to understand exactly what had gone wrong, eventually deciding not to redesign the shield itself but to redesign the way Orion returned to Earth by switching to a steeper and more direct re-entry trajectory that kept the shield consistently hot, allowing gases to escape safely instead of building pressure beneath the surface. On April 10, 2026, Orion began that final descent as the service module separated and the capsule turned its heat shield toward Earth before plunging into the upper atmosphere. At around 400,000 feet, plasma rapidly formed around the spacecraft as the surrounding air ionized into a glowing shell of superheated gas, wrapping the capsule in a brilliant orange fireball. Radio signals suddenly vanished and mission control lost contact with the crew as the plasma blocked communications, creating a tense 6-minute blackout where no one on Earth knew exactly what was happening inside the spacecraft. Inside the capsule, the astronauts were pressed into their seats by nearly 4 times the force of gravity, while outside the heat shield slowly burned away exactly as designed, carrying enormous amounts of heat away from the spacecraft second by second. Then, just as suddenly as it had disappeared, the signal returned. Orion had survived the most violent phase of re-entry, and moments later, drogue parachutes deployed, followed by 3 massive main parachutes that slowed the capsule from hypersonic speed to a gentle descent. And at 8:07 p.m. Eastern Time, Orion splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean, completing humanity's first crewed journey around the moon in more than half a century, and proving that the spacecraft designed for the Artemis era could carry astronauts safely beyond Earth orbit and bring them back home again.